Snow tapped lightly against the windows, a soft, endless patter in the quiet farmhouse. The world outside was calm and dark, blanketed in white, as if everything had stopped to listen. I was alone in the house. My parents had taken my little brother to his Christmas pageant at church. It was supposed to be a special treat for him, one of those things that makes Christmas feel like Christmas. I was 17, practically an adult, and I liked the quiet. I'd settled on the couch with a blanket, an old horror novel in my lap, and a mug of hot chocolate that steamed sweetly in my hands. I felt cozy, safe in the familiar old farmhouse that had been in our family for generations. The silence around me was thick, almost humming. I had almost forgotten what it was like to be alone in a house like this, especially on Christmas Eve, with all its magical, heavy atmosphere. I put my book down and wandered over to the kitchen to refill my mug. Then, from upstairs, I heard it. A muffled, dragging sound, like something heavy, shifting. I froze. My fingers went cold. The sound came again, a soft thump against the floorboards above me. I hadn't gone upstairs since my parents left, and I was sure everything had been locked and secured. Just the same, the sound didn't feel random, it felt alive. Intentional, like someone pacing just above me. Forcing myself to think logically, I whispered, probably just the old pipes. The farmhouse was ancient, after all. But even as I said it, I knew something felt wrong. There was a weight in the air, like a storm pressing down. The heavy stillness made my skin prickle. Thump. Another sound came from upstairs, a little closer to the stairs this time. I felt the hair on my arm stand up as I held my breath. Slowly, the footsteps crept closer, and I could hear an odd, scratchy hum almost, like someone murmuring a song they'd forgotten the words to. My stomach twisted. "It's nothing," I whispered to myself. "You're just being paranoid." I walked back to the living room, trying to shake it off, but the unease clung to me like cobwebs. Then, I heard it again, a dragging, scraping step directly above my head. The mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. My heart thudded in my chest as the sound grew louder, turning into distinct footsteps heading toward the top of the stairs. I stumbled back, my eyes fixed on the empty hallway. I dialed my mom's number with shaking fingers. No answer. I called my dad's voicemail. The silence in the house seemed to thicken, pressing down on me, while the slow footsteps crept down the stairs, one by one. Tap, 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 hello. I called out, my voice barely steady. "Who's there?" No answer. Just a pause, then another dragging footstep, heavy and slow, moving towards me. I backed up, feeling for the front door, but it was locked. My hands fumbled with the latch as I kept my eyes on the staircase. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. I finally pulled the door open, but a blast of icy air stopped me. Snow piled outside in mounds. I'd left my boots in the kitchen, but the footsteps kept coming. I shut the door, trying to convince myself it was just an animal, or something perfectly ordinary, but every inch of me knew better. I dashed to the kitchen, grabbing the biggest knife I could find. Then, the humming started again. It was louder now, a sickly, distorted version of Silent Night, sung so low, it sounded like a broken lullaby. My pulse hammered in my ears as I turned. The knife held out in front of me like a lifeline. And then, I saw it. At the bottom of the stairs, a figure stood. Its shape was wrong, hunched and twisted, with shoulders that seemed too broad and arms that hung too long. Its head cocked at an odd angle, and from beneath its hooded face, two pinprick eyes glinted in the dark. I choked back a gasp, backing up until I hit the counter. The figure took a step closer, its feet dragging, with an unsettling, lopsided gait. It didn't say anything, just stood there, watching and humming that distorted lullaby. "Please, please, just go," I whispered, my voice trembling. It didn't move. The silence pressed down like a weight, thick and heavy, filling every corner of the room. Then, in a sudden, jerky motion, it lifted one long, pale arm and pointed at me. I turned and bolted, running upstairs, slamming the door to my room behind me. My chest heaved as I pushed the chair under the doorknob, my heart pounding so loud I could barely think. I crouched in the corner, clutching the knife with white knuckles, staring at the door as the footsteps dragged down the hallway. The hum started again, growing louder, closer. I could hear it right outside my door, now a slow, broken tune that grew softer, fading into an almost gentle whisper. Then, silence. I held my breath, waiting, barely daring to move. A scratching sound began at the door. It started softly, then turned into a full scraping rhythm, as if long, ragged nails were clawing against the wood. I felt my chest tighten as the scratching grew faster, more frantic. Then, with one last, deafening bang, it stopped. I sat there, waiting, straining to hear anything over the pulse thundering in my ears. I didn't dare to move. Minutes passed. The house was silent again, the old farmhouse as empty and still as it had ever been. Finally, after what felt like hours, I crept to the door, pressing my ear to the wood, listening. The hallway was empty, and the snow outside lay undisturbed. I slid the chair away and opened the door just a crack, looking out into the dark hallway. There was nothing. No trace of the figure. Just the empty, cold silence of Christmas Eve. The night wore on. Eventually, my parents returned, and I tried to tell them about the strange visitor, but they brushed it off as a nightmare. They didn't see the faint, deep scratches on my bedroom door. They didn't notice the chill that lingered in the hallway. But I did. Every Christmas Eve since, I've stayed awake, listening for that hum, for the sound of dragging footsteps, and that broken song. I always loved Christmas growing up. The snow, the warmth of the fireplace, the smell of pine needles and cinnamon filling the house, it all felt magical. But last year, Christmas changed for me forever. Now, I can't look at a string of Christmas lights without feeling sick. It started like any other holiday season. My parents had gone out for last-minute shopping, leaving me to babysit my little sister, Mia. She was 6, full of that boundless Christmas excitement that only kids seem to have. I was 17 and over it, but I tried to play along. Mia begged me to put up the lights outside, saying Santa wouldn't know where to land if the house wasn't bright enough. I caved. I couldn't say no to her big, hopeful eyes. So I grabbed the old box of Christmas lights from the basement, bundled up, and headed outside into the freezing December air. The snow had just started to fall, light and soft, as I untangled the string of lights. They were ancient. Half the bulbs were dim or flickered, like they had a mind of their own. As I climbed the ladder to hang them on the eaves, I noticed something odd. One of the lights, a bulb near the middle of the strand, wasn't flickering like the others. It was glowing steadily. Too steadily. It wasn't the warm, soft light you'd expect from Christmas decorations. It was cold, white, almost harsh. It made my skin crawl. I brushed it off as an electrical issue and finished hanging the strand. By the time I was done, the house looked decent enough. Mia clapped and squealed in delight when I plugged them in, and I smiled despite the strange feeling twisting in my gut. That night, the lights wouldn't leave me alone. I was in bed, scrolling on my phone, when I noticed the faint glow outside my window. The white bulb, the too bright one, was shining right into my room. I got up, drew the curtain, and went back to my phone. But the light, it felt like it was watching me. I told myself I was being stupid, that it was just a bulb, but I couldn't shake the sensation. Finally, I pulled the plug on the lights altogether. That's when things got strange. About an hour later, I woke up. I wasn't sure why at first. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. Then I saw it. The glow. The white bulb was on again, but the strand was unplugged. I could see the cord, lying limp and dead on the floor outside. Yet there it was, glowing cold and steady, cutting through the darkness like a blade. I went to the window, heart pounding, and looked out. Snow blanketed the yard, soft and untouched, except something had left tracks, leading from the street to the house, deep and deliberate, straight to the light strand. My breath fogged the glass as I leaned closer, trying to make sense of it. They weren't footprints. They were long, deep gouges in the snow, like something heavy had been dragged. Then I saw it. At the edge of the yard, just beyond the glow of the lights, something moved. It was tall, impossibly tall. Its limbs thin and angular, like branches stripped of bark. Its face, or what I thought was, its face was pale and smooth, almost featureless except for 2 pinpricks of light where its eyes should have been. It was staring at me, I stumbled back from the window, heart racing, and grabbed my phone. I didn't know who to call my parents. The cops? What would I even say? Hi, there's a Christmas monster in my yard. My fingers fumbled over the screen as I tried to dial. Before I could hit send, the power in the house cut out. Everything plunged into darkness, save for the glow of the white bulb outside. And that's when Mia screamed. I bolted out of my room, nearly slipping on the hardwood floor as I ran to hers. The door was ajar, the faint glow of the bulb spilling through the crack. I shoved it open, heart in my throat. Mia was sitting up in bed, her little face pale and her eyes wide. It was at the window, she whispered, pointing with a trembling finger. It was tapping. I rushed to her and pulled her into my arms, shushing her and telling her it was just a bad dream, even though I didn't believe it myself. I glanced at her window. The glass was fogged from the cold, and in the center of the pane, there were 3 long, thin marks. Scratches. I carried Mia into my room, locking the door behind us. We sat on the bed, clutching each other, as the glow of the bulb filled the room like a sickly moonlight. I tried to call my parents again, but the line was dead. The house phone? I couldn't stop thinking about the tracks in the snow. Whatever it was, it had gotten closer. A faint tapping sound broke the silence. It was coming from the window. Slow, deliberate, tap, tap, tap. Mia buried her face in my chest, shaking. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The tapping stopped, and for a moment, the silence was worse. Then, I heard it scraping. Long, slow scratches against the side of the house, moving toward the front door, toward the lights. And then, it was inside. I don't know how, but I felt it. The air grew colder, heavy with a presence I couldn't explain. Something creaked down the hall, too light to be footsteps, too deliberate to be the house settling. I held Mia close, the knife I'd grabbed from the kitchen trembling in my hand. The glow outside flickered. Once, twice, and then it went out. When the power came back hours later, my parents found us in the closet, shivering and pale. I tried to tell them, but they didn't believe me. They said it was just a blackout, just my imagination. They didn't see the scratches on Mia's window, or the faint, deep gouges in the snow that led away from the house, disappearing into the woods. I threw the lights away the next morning, every bulb, but even now, sometimes, I see that cold white glow in the distance, and I wonder if it's still watching.